Did you know the United States is currently $30 trillion in debt? That's more than the entire economy of China and Japan combined, and it's growing every second. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. What if I told you the country is facing a perfect storm of political division, economic inequality, and social unrest, and it could all be leading to a collapse? Sounds dramatic, right? But it's a reality many experts fear. We're witnessing a rise in violent protests, a growing wealth gap, and crumbling infrastructure that could make entire cities grind to a halt. Meanwhile, a growing number of Americans are questioning whether the American dream is still even achievable. In this video, we'll take a deep dive into 10 shocking reasons why the US might be teetering on the brink of collapse. From mounting debt to social upheaval, it's all connected. And these aren't just opinions. They're backed by hard facts, real-world events, and studies that paint a terrifying picture of what could be ahead. But it's not all doom and gloom. As you'll see, there's still time to turn things around. But first, we need to understand just how close we are to the edge. Stay tuned, because you'll want to hear every single reason we believe could determine the fate of the United States. Number 1. Political polarization. The United States is deeply divided, and not just on policies or opinions, but on the very idea of what it means to be American. In recent years, political polarization has reached levels that many experts believe are unprecedented in modern history. It's no longer just a difference of opinion between two parties. It's a full-on ideological battle with people increasingly viewing each other as enemies rather than fellow citizens. The numbers tell a chilling story. According to research, 80% of Americans say the country is more divided now than it's ever been. And this division is affecting nearly every aspect of society, from how we consume news to how we treat people who have opposing views. Social media only fuels this divide, creating echo chambers where people only hear what they want to hear, reinforcing their beliefs while rejecting anything that doesn't fit their worldview. What's more concerning is that this political polarization isn't just talking points anymore. It's actively impacting governance. Congress can barely pass legislation as the two major political parties are locked in a bitter gridlock, unwilling to compromise on anything. Key issues like healthcare, immigration, and infrastructure have been delayed or ignored for years because of partisan conflict. This inability to govern makes the country less resilient to challenges, whether economic, environmental, or global in scope. And the social consequences of this divide are also deeply unsettling. As the country becomes more polarized, so does the threat of violent clashes between opposing groups. We've already seen this play out in protests, riots, and even incidents of political violence, as people on both sides feel more emboldened to act out in extreme ways. If this political polarization continues to widen, it could undermine the very fabric of American democracy, leaving the country vulnerable to even greater instability. Number 2. Economic inequality. Imagine living in a country where the top 1% controls more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. Sounds extreme, but this is the reality for millions of Americans today. The gap between the rich and the poor has been growing at an alarming rate, and many experts argue that this growing economic inequality is one of the biggest threats to the country's stability. Over the past few decades, the U.S. has seen a dramatic shift in wealth distribution. The rich are getting richer, while wages for the average American have stagnated. The median household income has barely kept up with inflation, and millions of people are living paycheck to paycheck. Meanwhile, the wealthiest 1% continue to accumulate more and more resources, with tax breaks and favorable policies that benefit the ultra-wealthy. This massive wealth gap isn't just a financial problem, it's a social and political time bomb. As the rich become more powerful, the middle and lower classes are finding it harder to climb the economic ladder. For many, the American dream feels out of reach, creating widespread frustration and a sense of helplessness. This growing inequality often leads to social unrest, as people begin to question the fairness of the system. The effects of economic inequality extend beyond just the individual. It impacts the entire economy, too. As the rich hoard wealth and invest overseas, money isn't circulating back into local communities. This weakens job growth, limits access to quality education, and leaves large portions of the population trapped in poverty. Without addressing this widening divide, the U.S. risks facing a future where social mobility is impossible, and the system is rigged to only benefit the wealthy. If the economic gap continues to grow unchecked, it could lead to a fracturing of society, leaving many Americans feeling alienated and disenfranchised. And when people feel left behind, they often turn to extreme solutions, further deepening the divide. Number 3. Rising debt and deficit. The U.S. national debt has reached a staggering $30 trillion, a figure that's almost impossible to fully grasp. To put it into perspective, that's more than the entire economic output of the next three largest economies in the world combined. But what's even more worrying is the fact that this debt is growing faster than the economy itself, with no clear plan in sight to reverse this trend. So, why is this a problem? First, let's talk about the budget deficit, the gap between what the government spends and what it takes in through taxes. Every year, the U.S. is running massive deficits, adding more to the debt pile. In 2023 alone, the deficit is projected to be over $1 trillion. This means the government is borrowing more money than ever before, just to keep things running. As this deficit continues to rise, so does the national debt, creating a dangerous cycle of borrowing and spending. The impact of this growing debt isn't just theoretical, it affects every American. Interest payments on the national debt already consume a significant portion of the federal budget, and as the debt grows, so will these payments. This takes away money that could be spent on critical infrastructure, healthcare, or education, leaving fewer resources for the things that actually improve people's lives. Moreover, this mountain of debt could lead to higher taxes and inflation in the future, putting even more pressure on working Americans. And while borrowing may seem manageable now, there's always the risk of a debt crisis, where the country is unable to meet its obligations. If that happens, it could lead to a financial collapse, as the US dollar could lose its standing as the world's reserve currency, and the economy could spiral into chaos. As long as this debt continues to grow unchecked, the country will remain on a precarious edge, vulnerable to any number of financial crises. Number 4, declining global influence. At one time, the United States was the undisputed superpower of the world, both militarily and economically. It called the shots on the global stage, shaping policies, forming alliances, and setting the tone for international relations. But over the last few decades, that influence has begun to wane, and some believe it's only a matter of time before the U.S. no longer holds the same level of power it once did. A key driver of this shift is the rise of China. As China's economy grows at an unprecedented rate, it's challenging the U.S. on multiple fronts. Beijing has not only expanded its military might, but is also investing heavily in infrastructure projects across the globe, making it a critical player in developing nations. In addition, China is increasingly asserting itself in global trade, creating trade deals and alliances that bypass U.S. influence altogether. Meanwhile, Russia too is growing its presence, particularly in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, areas traditionally under the U.S.'s influence. What does this mean for the U.S.? As its global dominance fades, its ability to shape world events diminishes. The U.S. no longer holds the same economic leverage it once did. Countries are less reliant on American markets and are looking to alternative trading partners, like China and the European Union. This has huge implications for everything from trade policies to military alliances. Furthermore, a declining global influence also weakens America's strategic advantage. With fewer countries aligned with U.S. interests, it becomes harder to maintain global peace, address international conflicts, or even respond effectively to global crises like pandemics or climate change. Without the strength to lead the world as it once did, the U.S. risks becoming more isolated, vulnerable to international pressures and unable to influence the course of future global events. Number 5. Crumbling infrastructure. America's infrastructure is aging, underfunded, and in many places falling apart. Roads, bridges, airports, and power grids that were once symbols of American innovation are now plagued with cracks, leaks, and outdated systems. Experts say that without serious investment, these critical structures could fail, and when they do, the consequences could be catastrophic. The American Society of Civil Engineers, ASCE, has repeatedly given the U.S. infrastructure a poor grade, with the latest report card rating it a C-. That means many of the country's vital systems, things like highways, water systems, and even the electrical grid, are on the brink of collapse. Over 47,000 bridges in the U.S. are considered structurally deficient, and countless others are in need of major repairs or updates. The power grid, too, is in desperate need of upgrades, with frequent blackouts in certain regions serving as a harsh reminder of its fragility. But this isn't just about inconvenience. The risks are real. A major infrastructure failure, whether it's a collapsed bridge, a power outage, or a water supply contamination, could cripple entire cities, causing widespread chaos. And as climate change continues to bring more extreme weather, these systems will face even greater strain. Yet, despite the obvious need for reform, infrastructure spending has been a low priority for lawmakers. The result? A decaying country, with cities and states unable to properly maintain or improve the systems that keep daily life running smoothly. If the country doesn't prioritize fixing its infrastructure soon, the situation could grow far worse, with economic losses, public health crises, and even loss of life from preventable disasters. We've put a lot of effort into creating this video for you. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you think about the state of the US today? Leave a comment below and let us know your thoughts. And don't forget, subscribing to our channel is just one click away. Join us for more eye-opening content like this. Number 6. Decline in education quality. The quality of education in the United States has been steadily declining, and this is perhaps one of the most consequential factors leading to a possible collapse. Once known for having the world's best universities and a relatively strong public education system, the U.S. now faces a crisis in both primary and secondary education, as well as in higher education. Public schools across the country are underfunded, overcrowded, and struggling to keep up with the demands of a rapidly changing world. In fact, a significant number of students are graduating without mastering basic skills in subjects like math, reading, and science. In 2019, only 37% of fourth graders scored at or above the proficient level in math on the National Assessment of Educational Progress, NAEP. Worse still, disparities in education quality between wealthier and poorer districts continue to widen, with students in low-income areas often receiving fewer resources and less qualified teachers. Higher education is facing its own set of challenges. The cost of college tuition has skyrocketed, making education inaccessible to many and leaving students drowning in debt. Today, student loan debt has surpassed $1.7 trillion, and graduates are entering the workforce with the burden of debt hanging over them, limiting their ability to buy homes, start businesses, or invest in their futures. Meanwhile, the quality of some college programs has been questioned, with many degrees not preparing students for the real world or the high-skilled jobs of today's economy. As a result, the U.S. is facing a skills gap. A growing number of young Americans are not equipped with the necessary knowledge or skills to compete in the global workforce. Without a strong and well-educated workforce, the country will struggle to maintain its economic competitiveness and global leadership. Number 7. Healthcare crisis. The healthcare system in the United States is a ticking time bomb, with costs spiraling out of control, millions of people unable to access necessary care, and a growing number of Americans facing chronic health conditions that could have long-term social and economic consequences. While the country spends more on healthcare than any other nation in the world, the outcomes often don't reflect the investment. One of the most pressing issues is the cost of healthcare. Insurance premiums, prescription drug prices, and out-of-pocket expenses continue to rise, leaving many Americans unable to afford basic medical services. In fact, nearly 1 in 4 Americans reported skipping medical care in 2022 due to high costs. Despite having some of the world's most advanced medical technologies and treatments, the U.S. remains plagued by a system that prioritizes profit over patient care. The lack of universal health care also means that millions are left without health insurance, and even those with coverage often face high deductibles and limited access to specialists and treatments. Rural areas are particularly hard hit, with many residents facing hospital closures and long travel distances to access essential care. This disparity in healthcare access is a significant issue, as it contributes to health outcomes that are far worse than those of other developed nations. Chronic diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, and obesity are at epidemic levels in the U.S., and the system is often ill-equipped to handle them. The focus tends to be on treating illnesses rather than preventing them, leading to an overburdened healthcare system that can't keep up with demand. Add to that the mental health crisis, which has only worsened during the pandemic, and you have a system on the brink of collapse. If these issues aren't addressed soon, the consequences will extend far beyond the healthcare system, affecting the economy, national productivity, and the overall well-being of the population. Number 8. Environmental challenges. The United States is facing a growing environmental crisis that is becoming harder to ignore. From rising sea levels to wildfires ravaging the West Coast, the country's natural resources are under assault, and the effects of climate change are already being felt across the nation. The growing environmental challenges threaten not only the health of the planet but also the economy, infrastructure, and even national security. One of the most pressing issues is climate change. As global temperatures rise, the U.S. is experiencing more extreme weather events, including hurricanes, droughts, and heat waves. In recent years, the number of natural disasters has skyrocketed, costing the nation billions of dollars in damages and displacing thousands of people. Cities like New York, Miami, and New Orleans are facing the imminent threat of rising sea levels, which could eventually lead to widespread flooding and displacement. The cost of rebuilding and responding to these disasters is unsustainable, yet it continues to escalate as extreme weather events become more frequent and intense. In addition to climate change, pollution remains a major problem. Air quality in many cities is declining, and water contamination is a serious issue in areas like Flint, Michigan, where residents still lack access to clean drinking water. The U.S. also produces vast amounts of waste, many of which end up in landfills or oceans, contributing to environmental degradation and harming wildlife. The environmental crisis doesn't just have ecological consequences, it's also costing the U.S. jobs and economic growth. Industries like agriculture, tourism, and fishing are particularly vulnerable to climate change and environmental degradation. If these challenges continue to worsen, they could spark a domino effect of economic hardship that would hit working-class Americans hardest. The question is, how long can the nation ignore these urgent environmental issues before the damage becomes irreversible? Number 9. Social unrest and division. America has always prided itself on being a melting pot, a nation where diverse backgrounds, cultures, and ideologies come together to form a unified society. But in recent years, the country has been increasingly torn apart by social unrest and division, which is putting the very concept of national unity into question. From protests against racial injustice to clashes over political ideologies, the U.S. is witnessing a growing sense of discontent, and the fabric that once held it together seems to be unraveling. Protests like those following the death of George Floyd in 2020 revealed just how deep the divisions have run, exposing a painful and ongoing struggle over race, inequality, and police brutality. While these protests brought about important conversations, they also highlighted the massive gap between different communities' experiences and the frustrations felt by many Americans. The Black Lives Matter movement, for example, isn't just about one incident. It's part of a broader call for systemic change, and it has ignited strong reactions, both supportive and hostile. But racial tensions are not the only flashpoint. Political polarization has reached a fever pitch, with both major parties entrenched in their own beliefs, unwilling to compromise. The growing culture wars over issues like abortion rights, gun control, and LGBTQ+ rights have further deepened these divisions, often manifesting in violence, online harassment, and even physical confrontations. It seems that in many parts of the country, it's no longer about differing opinions. It's about seeing the other side as the enemy. What's more concerning is how polarizing social media has become, feeding this division by creating echo chambers where people only interact with those who share their views, amplifying feelings of anger, distrust, and hostility. As a result, many Americans feel more alienated than ever before, believing that the country's system is no longer capable of representing their interests. If this social unrest continues to grow, it could lead to even more instability, eroding the sense of unity necessary for a thriving democracy. Number 10. Weakening democracy. The foundations of democracy in the United States are being tested like never before. While the country is still often seen as the beacon of democracy, there are growing concerns that the democratic system itself is starting to crack. From voter suppression to election interference and increasing partisan gridlock, the integrity of the nation's democratic institutions is being eroded, leaving many to wonder if the U.S. can maintain its status as a model of democratic governance. One of the most glaring issues is voter suppression. In several states, voter ID laws, polling place closures, and other restrictive measures are disproportionately affecting minority communities, making it harder for many eligible voters to cast their ballots. This undermines the very essence of democracy, where every citizen's vote should count equally. In addition, gerrymandering, the practice of manipulating district boundaries to favor one political party, has resulted in election outcomes that often don't reflect the will of the people, further distancing Americans from their representatives. Another concerning trend is the rising influence of money in politics. Political donations from wealthy individuals and corporations have increasingly shaped policies, often leading to decisions that benefit the rich while neglecting the needs of the average American. Super PACs, political action committees, and dark money are flooding campaigns, allowing those with deep pockets to hold even more sway over the political system. As a result, many citizens feel like their voices no longer matter in the political process. Lastly, political gridlock has paralyzed the government, making it nearly impossible to address urgent issues from healthcare to climate change. Instead of working together for the common good, political leaders are more focused on partisan battles and protecting their own interests. This lack of cooperation leads to ineffective governance and a growing sense that the democratic system is failing to deliver on its promises. If these trends continue, the very idea of democracy in the U.S. could be irreparably damaged, potentially leading to a system where the people's will no longer prevails. The signs of a nation in decline are all around us. From a failing education system to the erosion of democracy, the challenges the United States is facing are deeply interconnected and complex. If these issues are not addressed soon, the future of the nation could be at risk. It's not just about politics or economics. It's about the soul of a country that was once a beacon of hope and opportunity. This is a call to action, not just for policymakers, but for every single one of us. We need to reflect on where we're headed and demand better, for ourselves, for our communities, and for future generations. The issues discussed in this video are real, and the consequences are already unfolding. Now, it's up to us to take action and work together toward rebuilding and reforming the systems that have made America strong. Creating these videos takes an incredible amount of time, effort, and research. We strive to bring you insightful, thought-provoking content that you won't find anywhere else. So if you appreciate the work that goes into these videos and want to stay informed about the future of this nation, please hit that subscribe button. It's just one click, but it means the world to us. Your support keeps this channel going, and together we can keep shining a light on the issues that matter most. If you found this video impactful, share it with your friends and family. Let's start a conversation and push for change, because the future of the U.S. depends on it. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more important content like this.